all my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle paid the price. Want a slice, got to roll the dice. That's why all my life I've been grinding all my life. Look, all my life, been grinding all my life. Sacrifice, hustle paid the price. Want a slice, got to roll the dice. That's why all my life I've been grinding all my life. Look, I'm married to this game.
Hey everyone, welcome to Behind the Minds. We're here with Tyler Simmons. Jordan Brooks is out again for this episode, but we have another special guest, Erica Dowling. Now, Erica is a AUS stud. She played for CBU for 3 years, St. Mary's for 2 years. She was a part of a Canada Games team that when she was 16, playing way up. Erica has been a force in volleyball in Nova Scotia for the last X amount of years. She helped out coaching a bit with Sonics. Erica's here to touch on a topic that we all enjoy. We got excited. It kind of was brought up from the Bulls documentary, The Last Dance. So she reached out to us, which we appreciated, and wanted to talk about like the importance of teammates and personas and gender roles. Yeah. Ty, did you have anything you wanted to add about Erica or the episode?
Well, I'll just say watching Erica play when I was younger, she was an incredible player. You could see that she always wanted to win. And then I remember watching her play at SMU, and quite like myself, she was old and broken, and she had to ice all the time, but she's still the one person, like, when it came time to play, she was grabbing her teammates. She's just like, okay, let's go and win. So it was a pleasure watching Erica play.
Yeah, she's one of the athletes from Nova Scotia who's always had that, like, win at all costs, like, mentality, and she always had this, not a bad reputation, but she wasn't perceived the correct
as the
way.
nicest person at sometimes.
Yeah. And we brought her on because we know that's not the truth. You know, we surround ourselves with a great circle, and our circle, everybody in it likes to win. Yeah. So it's kind of talking on that, and she's well knowledgeable on this subject, so we'll get her to talk a bit about this. We're going to get Jordan to come in at the end and kind of do both episodes and his thoughts, because we're trying to cut him down a bit. So yeah, Erica, tell us how you thought you were perceived as a young player and a teammate.
Well, I feel like I'm not someone who dwells. Like, I think about all the positive experiences that I've had, which is, I've had so many. I've been part of amazing teams, great coaches, the best players. I've created amazing relationships from my teams. But while watching the documentary and watching Michael Jordan, something kind of like clicked in my head when they talk about how he was in practice and how he was on the sidelines, how he, took every practice as it was a game.
When people see this, they're going to say, well, he wasn't really a nice guy. He may have been a tyrant. Oh, well, that's you, because you never won anything. I wanted to win, but I wanted them to win and be a part of that as well.
And that just kind of resonated with me when I thought about his leadership. I'm not saying that I was perfect by any means, and I definitely didn't have the same skill or ability, but I did have that win at all costs mentality, and I think that it was perceived sometimes as having a bad attitude or as being bossy, when really in a competition, something just took over in me that was like, I just want to win. And I don't, I said to you guys that I started playing volleyball to, have fun and to make friends when I was 14. And then once I started getting comfortable and, started improving, then it was like, okay, it feels so good to compete. It feels so good to win. Like, I just want that feeling every time I play. So, and I had obviously heard from people that, people were saying I had a bad attitude or that I was not a good teammate. But in all honesty, I just really, really wanted to win. And, you know, maybe when I was younger, I did some things that could be, you know, that were wrong, but I don't think that I had, you know, an overall bad attitude.
No, and see, that's one thing that as people in your friend group, we knew that you didn't. You had the gamer mentality, which is a lot of things that's it's talked about in sports, whether you hate losing at wash or toss or you just don't like to lose. So that competitive edge is sometimes it rubs off on people who don't have that or can't relate, and then they have a judgment. Oh, this person is a bad teammate. When really they just want to win. There's a part in the Jordan documentary where he's just talking about, oh, people think I'm not a nice person, and I just want to win. And he starts tearing up because you can see that's his only goal. And you can see that, Eric, I've known you a long time. I know you hate to lose at whatever it is. So that's one thing that I think it's seen different in male and female sports. Yeah. And yeah, if you wanted to touch on that a bit too, just because in male sports, oh, he's very fiery and he's passionate, and then
the most aggressive guy is seen as the best guy.
Yeah,
usually, and everyone likes him.
Yeah, and then you go to female, oh, well, she's a bad teammate, or she's not a nice person. Yeah. So yeah, it's just strange to see, because realistically, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's on the court as long as everybody has that same I want to win at all costs genes. Yeah. But that's hard to find.
It's true, and I'll be surprised if I finish this whole segment without tearing up, because honestly, I'm like just such a passionate person, and that's in everything, in every part of my life. I'm passionate about the people I love. I'm passionate about my job. I just started teaching, and like I cried the first day I came home because I loved it so much, and I was like, I finally found what I wanted to do. So if I don't cry, I would be surprised. But that's another reason why I was a little inspired by the documentary, was because like you could just tell that he had been through so much, and that, you know, he did every single thing he could to become a champion.
Look, I don't have to do this. I'm only doing it because it is who I am. That's how I played the game. That was my mentality. If you don't want to play that way, don't play that way.
And, you know, to get his teammates to that level, and he still faced a lot of criticism. So, yeah, but then going back to the whole female versus male thing, I completely think that in a lot of cases, women, either in the workplace or in sport, can be mislabeled because they might have a little bit more aggression or assertiveness, and be called names when really that's just their leadership. And then when you look at males, you know, we look at Michael Jordan, and some people might think that his tactics and his leadership was a little bit went a little bit too far, but overall you just look at him as like such a hard worker and, you know, such a good leader. And then when you look at someone who maybe did those things as a female, and would we have the same view of them? I'm not sure that we would.
No, and another thing I think of is like the word in male sports that people get called, it would be, oh, he's an alpha. Yeah. Where if a woman is in sports and she's trying to be a leader, then other people will mislabel her and say, oh, she's being the B word. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, or she's trying to, you know, steal the show.
Yeah.
You see that a lot, actually. People feel like someone's stepping on their toes and they don't like it, and they feel Like,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes as a good leader, you have to do that. You have to pick up one of your teammates and says, you're not doing good enough. I need more out of you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to I was doing a little bit of research, and women are sometimes encouraged to be passive. And then when you think about women in sport, and I had some experiences where I felt like my team was supposed to be this cohesive unit of like best friends who have pillow fights and, just laugh together. But that wasn't why I was there. And I think sometimes when teams are picked and it's a female team, that personality comes into play a little bit more than it does when you're picking males. I think sometimes, and not all cases, skill might be the number one thing for males. And I think sometimes women can be pushed aside because of their personality.
Yeah.
Because they might not they might not bond with the rest of the girls.
The team. Yeah, and even like small things, like if two people are tied, like skill wise, but say this person, she's ready on time, she's always trying to lead, or that's a like benefit, right? But sometimes I agree with like personalities. That's half the job of coaching is managing personalities. Like if you looked at Phil Jackson, I know we're talking about this documentary a lot, but he was great at keeping everybody in the same unit going the same way while letting them do their own thing.
So like for me, I've played sports with people who I didn't like, and they didn't like me, and that was fine.
Yeah.
We didn't go out and hang out after soccer or volleyball. It's just like, we just know that we will play well together on the court or on the field, but when it came time for after-curricular, we're just not friends. Like, we don't have to be buddy and be, but like you don't see in female sports, you don't see that as much. Like there's a need for team cohesiveness type of thing that people feel like you have to be best buddies, and that's not necessarily the case all the time.
And then if you don't, that you're the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like you can't have 12 girls, you can't have 12 guys either. You can't have 12 people put together and asked to spend all this time together. Like the AUS season is so long, and you're together every single day, and you can't ask those 12 people to never have arguments or to always get along. That's just not how it works. But then I wonder, if that person that might be a little bit more aggressive, they're seen as the problem, but really maybe their personalities just don't mix, and I feel like that's okay.
Just kind of want to hear experience what it's like playing with friends who have that same competitive gene. I know we'll probably all have stories of someone we can hold ourselves accountable to and a little bit more. So
yeah.
Did you just want to start there, Erica?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that learning how to like bounce off your teammates, that comes a little bit with age, and it's definitely harder when you're younger. So things are taken a little bit more seriously and more personal when you're younger, and then you learn that this is just part of the game. But since I started volleyball when I was 12, I right away had people on my team who I knew we were both there for the same reason, and that we were both going to do whatever it took, or all of us were going to do whatever it took. I had some core girls through my youth teams, and I knew that they were also mislabeled, and they could have been called bitches or called girls with bad attitude, but they were like me, and they just wanted to win. And it was easy to play with those people because you knew that you could leave that practice or that game, and whatever happened was kind of left there. And they weren't going to go home and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe her, and I can't believe what she said. Like, it was just kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna, do better, because doing better means I'm better for the team. And if, we all think that way, then we'll have more success. So there were a lot of girls I played with that, we could hold each other accountable and tell each other when they needed to get their head out of their ass, or, stuff like that. I also had girls.
Sorry. When you reached out about like this topic, a girl who was on your team who we just had on our other episode, Megan McDougall. Mm-hmm. You guys were thick as thieves, super close, but
both
you guys
super competitive.
Oh, you guys would be the first person to call each other.
The most competitive.
Yeah, so you guys would be the people to call each other out and hold each other accountable. When you necessarily, sometimes you can't talk to every teammate like that because some people are soft as Charmin. Mm-hmm. But you have to know, that's one thing about being a leader, is knowing who you can jab and get going, and who you have to like put your arm around and be like, come on. Like,
that's very true.
Yeah, and like I think that's one thing. When I played with one of my best friends growing up, Jeremy Nogler, we would holler at each other and be petty as anything, but we knew that like we had each other's backs, and I think that's important too. And that's one relationship with you and Megan. Like, you guys are still very close today. Mm-hmm. And how many times a week?
We still bicker, and we're in our late 20s. So, but when I think about my relationship with Megan, we used to butt heads a lot, and I think about, practices where we would play 2-on-2, and like no one would want us to be on different teams because it just got heated. And then I also think like, yes, Megan and I are still best friends, and Haley and Becky as well, and I played with them since I was 13. And that makes me think like we all were, in the same boat. We didn't have the same leadership, but we were all leaders. And that's why we are still close today, because we know each other's strengths and what we could say to each other and what got the other person going. And that also makes me think, when you look at the Michael Jordan documentary, the people that look at that and say, wow, he was a dick, are probably the same people that would say that I was a bitch.
Exactly. And those are the people that you don't want to surround yourself with.
Wow, what a leader. Like, those are the people that I want to be playing with.
Yeah. And like, when in the moment, sometimes people might think that it's like bossy or whatnot. But then if you fast forward 5 years later, those are the same people that you look back and like, they held me accountable. Like, I'm glad that I got to play with a leader like this. But in the moment, they don't like it. But down the road, it's like, I'm glad I played with someone like that.
Oh, for sure. And like, those are the people you want to surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. Like, and they're the people that you're like, oh, well, I'm still going to be friends with them down the road, because they have the same goals and the same makeup. Yeah. And that's important too in coaching, trying to find that leader who might be in their first or second year, but you know that when they start moving, people start going with them, and they also have that DNA. So that's another thing that I find personally that's very important in coaching, is trying to figure out who's going to lead the team in what direction, and how to keep egos and management
in check.
Yeah, in check
and
go
in one direction.
And in one direction,
and you talk about Phil Jackson. Well, he knew what each player needed to do their best, and that's super important.
Yeah, no, it is. We're going to touch a little bit about this Canada Games team that you were on. Being a very underage, you were 16U, and you were on maybe one of the most dominant. The last one we had was pretty dominant, but besides that, this would have been right up there. Do you want to give us a little breakdown of who all was on that team, what it was like being an underager, playing with them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I want to touch on something I just said before, because like when I feel like this is kind of like a disclaimer, but when I'm talking about like Michael Jordan, I don't think that he was perfect, and I don't think that I was even close to being perfect, because Like, I'm not saying that everything that I did was right. And I don't think that everything he did was right. You know, sometimes when you get in your teammates' faces or you talk back to a coach, like, that's passion, but it's not always right. So I feel like I should throw out there that, like, you know, I don't think that, like, sometimes I probably was a bitch, but, like, you know.
Oh, Erica, I agree. We do this thing at CEC alumni every year. I apologize to my coach every year because, like, I did stuff that was kind of stupid. Like, sometimes kick chairs or be petty, but it was all out of passion. It's all out of the right spot. It's just how it's just how it's presented. And, you know, he gets it. He's the same way. But people that don't have that makeup of being a gamer or like wanting to win at all costs might perceive it differently.
Yeah. So that Canada Games team, I was 16, and I think the age group was 21. So girls in their first few years of university, and I was in my first or second year of high school. So it was that's a big gap, not age-wise, but just life experience-wise. And I remember looking up to these girls that are in university, they're living on their own, just being like, wow, I can't wait to be them one day. But on the team was Kristen Ryan, Lauren Sears, Vanessa St. George, Carrie Smith, although she was injured for the actual tournament, Catherine Ryan, Anastasia Callahan, Petra was on the team. Who else was on the team? Hillary Sears. Just a lot of intense, fierce ladies. And when I first was on when I first got told I was going to be on the team, I was like, "Are you sure?" Because, like, I don't feel like I fit in with these women. And after the first practice, I really felt like I didn't. I remember because Darren Russell was the head coach, and I remember one of these drills that we used to do was basically the girls that were playing libero or more defense would basically stand mid-court while everyone else would hit. And when you have Carrie Smith and Lauren Sears and Vanessa up there, you know, with no block, it was pretty terrifying. And not only was their skill a little bit intimidating, but their personalities were intimidating. And I remember being terrified of them. I didn't want to talk to anyone because I just felt like they were almost like those cool big sisters that would tell you to, like, get out of their room. And for the first while, I was pretty nervous and scared. And I thought, like, these girls are so intense. And I guess they probably had a part in why I became intense, because I respected them so much, and their level of competition and their fierceness was why our team did so well. We had such a good group of girls who could just, you know, they would perform, and, like, winning was number one.
So as in typical fashion, Tyler's headphones keep popping out. So that's where he got the toque from. Erica, we'll get you to talk a bit more about that team dynamic, being so young, who you turn to as friends. I know you and Hillary Sears got close that summer. Relationships with coaches while being the youngest, and leaders that it helped you develop as a leader for when you went back to your high school and club days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that was probably one of my favorite teams to be on, just because the level of play was really high, and so was the intensity. Every practice was intense, and Darren Russell was our coach, and he's always intense, which is what I love about him.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
And I created some amazing relationships that year with those girls. Hillary is one of them, because we were two of the youngest, with Anastasia, and I also formed like a strong relationship with Kristen Ryan, and there were a few girls on that team that year that played for CBU, and that was a big reason why I went there, because I loved playing with those girls, and I wanted to play with them some more. So that's where I went, and I remember playing with Kristen because we were both the main passers at one point. It was just two of us, and I remember her kicking me out of drills and telling me to get off the floor because I wasn't performing. And we'd go back the next day. She'd give me a hug, and everything was good. So when I went back into playing with girls my age, it was probably a little bit of a shock because, those girls were older, they were more mature, and maybe they could handle a little bit more criticism. But it definitely helped me become more confident because I left that team thinking like, okay, I didn't feel like I belonged, and now I feel like I had my place. It was not a starting place. It wasn't even second string, but I had a place, and they still demanded my best, like no matter what. Knowing that I wasn't going to see the floor, I was still held accountable and was still told, that nothing would be accepted except my best.
Do you?
And I would say that. What's that?
One quick question about like being young and playing up. Do you think that's important for kids' development? Being young, playing up, and still being able to play at their level so that they can see what it's like. If you have a kid who's dominant all the way through, and then they get to university, and then they're just sitting, chilling on the bench with a bad attitude because they're always used to being the big fish. How do you think that has shaped you as a player, being really probably one of the first times you've been on a bench or a part of a bench?
Yeah, it's so true. I played, during exhibition, but during Canada Games, I did not see the floor, and I didn't expect to. But it definitely humbles you to, go from being the go-to player to being, 14th out of 14. So I do think that it helped, one, my skill. I mean, you get better when you play with better people. I don't think you will reach your full potential when you're always playing with people who are less skilled or the same level as you. Yeah. And there were people my age group who were better than me, and playing with them made me better. But these older girls, it was just such a different game. So yeah, I definitely think that it benefited me as a player and as a leader because I got to see, the 6 girls that were on the court were all leaders, and everyone had their role and everyone executed their role, and you didn't have to try and be something that you weren't. So girls that were more quiet, they had a role. That doesn't mean that they weren't leaders, but like everyone just kind of did what they were supposed to do, and that's why it worked.
So do you think that year was a big year for fostering a more competitive nature of you, playing with those older girls?
Yeah, definitely, because you had to compete or you would be just blown out of the gym. Like if I, standing on the back line waiting for the girls to hit the ball at me, I couldn't back down. It definitely brought out a little bit more aggression, and I had to try to prove myself every practice, even knowing that I wasn't one of the top players. I still wanted to prove myself and prove to Darren like that he picked me for a good reason, and not be like, oh my gosh, I'm 16, yay me, I got a spot on the team, that's good enough. Like, I still wanted to go out and be a competitor. And I think that taught me a lot about leadership, and it taught me a lot about life, like not just in sport, but, in the workplace, in relationships.
Yeah, and see, Darren's been around the sport for so long. He's from Churro, but seeing a 16-year-old kid that had a motor, who wanted to win, who wanted to be better. You, Hillary, and Anastasia were at a elite group who wanted to win. So someone who didn't have that same makeup or that same DNA wouldn't have gotten selected. So I think that's important in your and Darren's relationship, that he recognized that you had that makeup and that you, like, that's what made you tick. That's your motor, it's called in sports. And that, how has that affected and helped your guys' relationship to this day?
Yeah, so I played for Darren at 16, and I always remember before that and after that going to the SMU tournament. Darren and I were always close. I went to CBU. I still had like so much love for Darren. I remember, shaking his hand after games, and there was never any hard feelings from going our separate ways. But then I always kind of kept in touch with him while I was at CBU, and when I decided to leave the team, I reached out to him, and he said, I have room for you if you want to join the squad. So I was so excited, because I think Darren is one of the best coaches in women's volleyball. He holds everyone accountable, and he's intense, and he wants to win more than anybody else out there.
Yeah.
And I remember both years that I was there, talking about playoffs, and I remember one year I had played 3 years at CBU, and I'd been to the playoffs twice, lost in the first game both times. Then I go to SMU, first year of playoffs. We were down by 2 sets to Moncton, came back to win in 5. I think it was like 18-16 or something crazy like that in the 5th set, and I bawled after the game. And we won, and everyone was like, what is wrong with you? And Darren comes over, and he gave me a hug, and he was like, your first playoff win. And I was like, yep. And it was so emotional. But I also remember before, like, one of our playoff games, him kind of tearing up and saying, I want to see you guys hold that banner. That is why I'm so intense. And you could really feel in every practice and in every game that he did it for us, and he sacrificed his time and his family to be with us, because he wanted each one of his players to be a champion. And he truly believed that, everyone on our team deserved to hold that banner. And although we didn't, it was just like such an amazing feeling to know that your coach had no reason to coach besides his girls,
Yeah, and
champions.
you could feel the trust and how he believed in you guys so much that you could feel it, and you weren't afraid to either make aggressive mistakes or like, he had your back and you guys had his back.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's one piece of advice that you could share young females or males in sports, kind of leading our segment out, what would it be?
Mm-hmm. So I guess going back to my initial reason for bringing up this topic was that I saw in Michael Jordan the leadership and the mentality of, do anything to win. And I wondered if, girls that had the same mentality were treated the same. And my, I guess, last piece of advice, or my purpose for this talk, would be, that sometimes girls are made to feel like they have to act a certain way or be a certain way to fit in. I see some of my friends who feel like to have relationships with other people, they need to be a certain way, or they can't be too aggressive. And I just say, like, being fierce there's nothing wrong with being fierce and being passionate and wanting to win. And, you know, if people think you're a bitch along the way, then they're not going to be, you know, in your corner later on. So don't even worry about them. I have had amazing opportunities, and I'm thankful for the way that I am, because I've created such great relationships, and I, you know, have had job opportunities, and I don't regret anything because I followed my passion and I never tried to be anything different. So I would just say, you know, if you have something inside of you questioning whether you're too aggressive or too assertive, or people think you're bossy, like, no, just keep being the way that you are, because you will not regret it.
That's a very powerful message, and it just goes to show to keep your circle tight of people who you surround yourself. If you surround yourself with winners, and that's your whole friend group mentality, you'll see everybody grow.
And it is okay as a female to go for your goal and to be aggressive and be competitive, because in the long run, it's going to pay up for you. Right?
It's true, whether it's in your sport or you know, in your career.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on and giving us your time, Erica.
Hey everyone, Jordan Brooks here from Behind the Mines. Unable to take part in our last two episodes. They're actually filmed in the same day, but just wanted to chime in a little bit on our new up-and-coming episode, which is with a good friend of mine for pretty much my entire life, Erica Dowling. We brought her on just to talk about the mentality of, you know, men versus women, you know, male versus female athletes. You know, it can be a little bit of a tricky topic. You know, some women are looked at as bossy or what have you because of them trying to hold their players accountable. And you know, we watched The Last Dance and we see the way Michael was and how harsh he was to his teammates. And you see them all now and they're all saying, well, you know, he just wanted you to do your best, and he never asked you to do anything that he didn't do. And I think, you know, it's an interesting topic. And, you know, with coaching girls, I've had the chance to, you know, have to like experience what that's like and change my coaching a little bit. But ultimately, I think that you just need to stay positive and you'll get the most out of those players. Even though I do agree that this generation is soft, and it gets softer and softer as it goes, and people can't handle criticism near as much as they used to be able to. I agree with all that, but that doesn't mean that I don't necessarily, that I'm not going to change how I coach. Because of that, I have to. It's just the way to get the most out of your players. It used to be on them and harp on them and be negative, and now it isn't. And I'm wondering, you know, maybe it never was. And one thing I'll say, you know, about Erica is that she did want to win. There's no doubt in my mind that she wanted to win, and she definitely wouldn't have been happy if her teams didn't. And you know, she was someone who, I mean, you can talk about her career. She was one of the best 16U players that Nova Scotia has seen in a long time. And I know that because I've been here and I know. I've seen all the players play. You know, I've been watching the girls volleyball in Nova Scotia since I was a boy. And, you know, I know that Erica's dominance back then was, you know, she was one of the most dominant players that we've had at that age. And played on some incredibly dominant teams with some other incredible players. You know, so I think the standard was set very high. And, you know, she played for coaches that would be, you know, that would hold you accountable and that would do that. And she was all for it. And, you know, so I think when she got into those situations where the players didn't necessarily seem like they wanted it as much as her, it may not even have been that they didn't, but, you know, the way she was used to it was, you know, we give it our all, we call each other out, we hold each other accountable. And I think for her, it was, you know, it was just tough to, you know, to make that adjustment. And I think if she had grown up in a generation, maybe even 5 years earlier, her whole career could have been, you know, could have gone a little easier, because I know there were times where, you know, she was looked at as a bad teammate or having a bad attitude. And, you know, like she says in the episode, she just wanted to, she wanted the best, that be the best she could be, and for her teams to be that way. You know, I think once again, you know, I've coached girls that are looked at like they have bad attitudes recently. People will say that, you'll hear it from coaches or from other players. Oh, like she's no fun to play with, blah, 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 bossy, whatever. And most of them, if not all of them, like they just want it. And their way of expressing that is different than others. You know, I think that Erica is someone who definitely, you know, her passion towards the game and how she went about things may have come across as a bossy person. And really, you know, Erica and I have been as close as we've been over these years because I always knew that she was, you know, she's a sweet girl. And, you know, she isn't one bit mean. And if she is, it's not because she wants to be. I think that, you know, over the years, she's definitely matured. And that's helped her probably see that how she went about some things she did, maybe she could have changed. And she says it in the episode when she was younger, maybe she had should have said things differently. And I think, you know, with maturity, you see that. If you're a female athlete and you want to have that intensity and act like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant and really be on people, I think it's important, one, that you have to, like you heard what they said about Michael, anything he asked you to do, he did himself. That's the first and foremost. And that goes for a male or a female athlete. If you want to be that, if you want to have that, you know, that mentality and that intensity and really being on your teammates, you better be doing every single thing you're asking of them. And if you're not, then you need to stop saying it, because no one's going to listen if you're not doing what it is you're saying. And that doesn't necessarily, you know, mean to be, you know, you need to be the best player out there, but you better be doing what it is you're asking of others. And a lot of times, you know, I've seen in the NBA, like a guy like a Jimmy Butler, a lot of people thought he was a harsh teammate, and, you know, I don't know what the situation was there, but, you know, he didn't enjoy playing with a lot of these younger athletes that he played with on Minnesota and in Philly. But I just have to ask myself, you know, Jimmy Butler's a hard worker, and he's a great player, but I don't know if they have enough respect for him, you know, his game, that they're all going to listen to someone like him versus what, you know, the man up there, the best out there, best to ever do it. You know, people respond to what LeBron tells them because he does it, and he's also the greatest. So I think sometimes who you are as a person, some people just, people listen better to them. You know, those female players that people look at as being bossy or a bitch. Well, maybe you need to remind them and talk to them about it and say, like, you know, I just want us to be the best we can be. I'm not trying to be rude. You know, sitting down and having that conversation with someone and reminding them that you aren't trying to be bossy may help your case.
But I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
What's understood ain't gotta be explained, but you don't understand me.